The first vice president of the Venezuelan United Socialist Party, Diosdado Cabello, emphasized that the recent sanctions imposed by Canada against Venezuelan officials represent nothing more than a failure. In Ecuador, the government said that this Thursday will be the last day without electricity after almost 3 months of power outages. And the Israeli regime mounted a series of new attacks on Yemen. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Stay with us. In Venezuela, the first vice president of the Venezuelan United Socialist Party, Diosdado Cabello, emphasized that the recent sanctions imposed by Canada against the Venezuelan officials represent nothing more than a failure.
These new sanctions against Venezuelan officials. Canada is lagging behind because they only do what the government of the United States tells them to do. The US government sneezes and then Canada gets nervous. They don't realize that it has really failed. The method has failed.
Cabello also condemned the U.S. Embassy's questioning of Venezuela's constitutionality, considering that the U.S. appointed an illegitimate president in the country and tried to overturn the constitution.
Embajada de los Estados Unidos. El 10 de enero.
According to the U.S. Embassy, January 10 is the deadline for Nicolás Maduro. Refusing a democratic transition, they say, will be the definitive rupture with the constitutional order and will plunge Venezuela into an even deeper crisis. It is funny when they talk about the constitution in Venezuela, when they appointed a president here and tried to tear that constitution to shreds. And they'd still approve budget to that man. And they came up with a horrible thing called transitional statute, which derogates the Constitution. You look in that Constitution to see if a statute can derogate it, and it does not appear anywhere.
Cabello also stressed that the recent U.S. sanctions against the Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro were in response to instructions from the outgoing U.S. administration.
Última hora. Alberto wrote news, última hora.
Last minute. Alberto wrote news posted a last-minute note from the European press that says the European Union is preparing more sanctions against Nicolás Maduro for lack of democratic transition in Venezuela. Remember that we are sanctioned. You don't need to sanction us again. You will make a fool of yourselves. Yes, because they might try to do it. What happens is that the United States has taken some new sanctions and they go after the United States. They do whatever the United States government says. They don't even think that the people who decided to impose the sanctions are going to live. 10 days after Nicolás Maduro and his people are sworn in, the President of the United States is sworn in. Exactly 10 days later. Here it is January 10, and there it is January 20. So they don't know what to do because they depend on the United States.
On the other hand, Cabello pointed out that what happened in Venezuela on July 29th after the elections had already been predicted by Commander Hugo Chávez, who always feared the intentions of the extreme right wing of the country.
Entonces, el comandante Chávez mostraba su preocupación y nos decía,
At that time, Chávez showed his concern and kept warning us. They were going to kill the revolutionaries. Wasn't that what they did? And wasn't that what they did on the 29th? Didn't they look for the Venezuelan women to kill? And they ended up killing 2 women? And they did it in a very mean way, with hatred, as they know how to do. And why did they do it? To spread fear. Then came the persecution. Then came the persecution of anyone who was a Chavista, but they didn't count on the sharpness of the Chavistas. This happened on day 29, and on day 30, we were on the streets.
We stay in Venezuela, where the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean informed on Wednesday that the country leads economic growth in the Latin American region. The report indicates an increase in Venezuelan GDP of 6.2% by 2024, following by South American nations such as Paraguay, Brazil, Peru, and Uruguay. Meanwhile, at the opposite extreme are Argentina, Ecuador, and Bolivia. Central American nations showed less notable figures, with the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and Honduras standing out. Meanwhile, in the English-speaking Caribbean, the economy with the best record was Guyana. Regional growth in the year up to date is expected to be 2.2%, and in 2025 it is projected at 2.4%. In Bolivia, members of various social organizations gathered in the Murillo Square to celebrate the day of the democratic and cultural revolution. In celebration of the first electoral victory of the movement to socialism, MAS, in 2005, groups of citizens gathered in La Paz City, the Bolivian capital. The date commemorates the social and historical struggles of the farmer, indigenous, and intercultural organizations for a better future. This great mobilization takes place within the framework of a call made by the MAS Board of Directors to the Bolivian people. And now we have a short break coming up, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Ecuador, the government said that this Thursday will be the last day without electricity after almost 3 months of power outages. A second-generation ship is expected to arrive on the shores of Guayaquil this Thursday to help generate electricity. Since September 23rd of this year, Ecuador has been facing prolonged blackouts that have lasted up to 14 hours a day in the midst of the drought. In this context, questions have been raised about the government's lack of timely action to address the situation. Colombian authorities confirmed Wednesday the discovery of human remains in a mass grave located in the city of Medellin. According to the government, these are people reported missing between 1978 and 2016 in the framework of the armed conflict. Sources linked to the search task informed that the investigations is a result of the work carried out by the Special Jurisdiction for Peace and the Unit for the Search for Missing Persons, which began in 2015. Complaints filed by human rights organizations in Medellin state that this place was the scene of forced disappearances in the 2000s, a period of worsening armed conflict in the city. In Paraguay, citizens demonstrate against injustice with the 7 wounds of our people, an event of reflection and remembrance to be held at the end of the year. The event is intended to address issues that are fundamental to understand the past and build a better future. It is also an opportunity to remember, reflect, and honor the memory of those who suffer and fought for the country, including women, victims of feminicide, and native peoples. The objective is to pay attention to some painful episodes that have marked the history of the Paraguayan people. In addition, the event is open to the public and seeks to create a space for dialogue on the history and future of the country. Mexican women searching mothers and relatives of femicide victims began a hunger strike in front of the Chiapas state government building on Wednesday, demanding justice for the disappeared. The 12 leaders of the group began an indefinite hunger strike until the governor and the attorney general respond to their demands for search and justice. In a symbolic act of protest, the members of the collective Mothers in Resistance positioned themselves in front of the government with banners, posters, a coffin with photos of the disappeared women and men. The Executive Secretariat of the National Public Security System reported that between January and October 2024, 667 femicides were registered in Mexico, 21 of which occurred in Chiapas. The government of the U.S. state of California, Gavin Newsom, declared an emergency on Wednesday in the face of the continued spread of the H5N1 avian flu in that part of the western part of the country. Despite intense efforts to contain the virus, Newsom said the measure was already necessary because it had spread beyond the Central Valley to 4 dairies in the southern part of the state. He clarified, however, that while the risk to the public remains low, steps will be taken to prevent the spread of the virus. Of the 61 confirmed human cases of avian flu in the United States so far this year, 34 were reported in California. According to the Centers for the Disease Control and Prevention, most of them were diagnosed in dairy farm workers. We go to Russia, where the President Vladimir Putin held a press conference with national and international journalists to give an assessment on the results achieved by his government during the year 2024. The head of state commented that in the context of the conflict against Ukraine, the situation is changing dramatically, assuring that every day the Russian fighters are recovering square kilometers of territory. On the other hand, Putin said he doesn't know whether the West understood correctly the recent changes in the Russian Federation's nuclear doctrine. This after a change that states that a massive attack on the country, including with cruise missiles and drones, could generate a nuclear response. On the other hand, the president explained that the Russian economy has remained stable despite external threats growing by approximately 8% in the last 2 years. In Russia, at least 80 tons of oil have already been collected off the coast of southern Russia after 2 oil tankers were wrecked in the Kerch Strait. In the Temryk and Anapa regions, 49 kilometers of the coast are being cleaned, and more than 8.1 kilometers of the Black Sea have already been cleaned on the coast of the Krasnodar region. The tankers Volgoneft 212, with a crew of 13 people, and Volgoneft 239, with a crew of 14, sank in the area of the Kerch Strait on December 15th. The 2 vessels were carrying a total of about 9,200 tons of oil products, and the collision, caused by a storm, resulted in a spill of about 3,000 tons of fuel. Peru's National Civil Defense Institute reported on Wednesday that 182 districts in the highlands are at risk of being affected by landslides due to possible heavy rains. According to the authorities, the southern department of Ayacucho has the highest number of districts at very high risk. In addition, another 83 districts in these same regions are at high risk of being affected. In view of this situation, the Civil Defense urged local and regional authorities to check that evacuation routes are clear, as well as the availability of health centers, fire departments, and police stations in their jurisdictions. It also recommended the population to protect and reinforce the roofs of their homes. The French government declared Wednesday a state of exceptional natural calamity in the Mayotte archipelago after the passage of Cyclone Chido, which left 31 deaths and 45 injured. On the X account, the Ministry of the Overseas announced the measure to allow a faster and more efficient management of the crisis and facilitate pursuing emergency measures. The minister in charge, François-Noël Buffet, stressed the need to mobilize all resources to help and support nationals in this terrible experience. In addition to the injured and death, authorities reported significant damage to infrastructure as well as failures in the electricity, communications and internet services. A Royal Australian Air Force AAF plane arrived on the island of Vanuatu, carrying aid packages and personnel to assist in the rescue of people in that South Pacific nation after being hit by a violent earthquake. After unloading the cargo, the RAF aircraft transported Australian citizens from the capital port of Vella and tourists back to Australia. The earthquake left over 200 people injured and 9 deaths at the central hospital. In addition, after the severe damage caused by the quake to the reservoirs, the capital city was left without water supplies. The earthquake had a depth of 57 kilometers and its epicenter was 30 kilometers west of the capital Vanuatu, where around 330,000 people inhabit in a group of 80 islands. We have a second short break coming up, but first we invite you to join and follow our YouTube channel at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The Israeli regime mounted a series of new attacks on Yemen. Several explosions were heard in Yemen's capital Sana'a and the city of Hodeidah. In this context, the Yemeni television channel Al Masirah reported that as a result of this new aggression, 7 people were killed in the port of As Salif and 2 others at the Ras Isa oil installations. The U.S. Portal Actions announced that the Israeli regime informed the United States before attacking Yemen. Earlier, the Israeli army claimed that sirens were heard in the center of the occupied territories because of a rocket strike launched from Yemen early on Thursday. Human Rights Watch says Israel is deliberately depriving Palestinian citizens in Gaza of adequate access to water, resulting in thousands of deaths. The organization detailed that the Israeli authorities cut off and then restricted the supply of drinking water to Gaza. The executive director of Human Rights Watch, Tirana Hassan, affirmed that this is not just negligence but a calculated policy of deprivation that has resulted in the death of thousands of people from dehydration and disease, which is nothing less than a crime against humanity and an act of genocide. Likewise, Amnesty International reported that the Israeli military has committed in Gaza at least 3 of the 5 acts prohibited by the 1948 Genocide Convention. A fire set at a coffee shop in Hanoi, Vietnam on Wednesday night has left 11 people dead, while the police detained a suspect. Vietnam's Ministry of Public Security detailed that the blaze started late Wednesday night at a 3-story establishment in the capital. The authorities reported that, according to initial investigations, the fire started after an argument had taken place. A man already confessed having used gasoline to spread the flames on the first floor of of the premises and the staff of the cafeteria. In this context, 11 people lost their lives while 7 were injured. Reports indicate that the police will charge the arrested suspect with murder.
Around 5 to 6 motorbikes were burning fiercely, blocking the entrance. About 15 minutes later, I think we saw one person using the flash of a mobile phone on the balcony of the 3rd floor. Then we knew that there were some survivors inside. 15 minutes later, when the fire truck arrived, they used the stairs to get people out.
The government of Italy returned to Mexico 101 archaeological pieces belonging to the national cultural heritage. During a ceremony at the Mexican Embassy in Rome, the Undersecretary of Foreign Affairs, Maria Teresa Mercado, expressed her gratitude to the European authorities for the significant and numerous return of the objects. Through a virtual link, the General Director of the National Institute of Anthropology and History, Diego Prieto, informed that the returned pieces were seized in the cities of Rome, Perugia, Udine, Ancona, and Cosenza. Since 2018, this Latin American nation has achieved the restitution of almost 800 archaeological pieces confiscated by the Italian security forces. We have come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.